Okay, so this is a bit of a ramble, but hear me out. I think I stumbled across something that is a little different than the usual way of putting God's justice and mercy and so on, or at least a new way of wording it so that it produces a more fruitful understanding of the reasons why people don't want to believe that they cannot earn heaven. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking in my head, like, why does Warhammer 40,000 convince me to be more courageous in the face of danger through limited beings facing horrible monstrosities that are above their position and yet striving against them anyways? And it's sort of a warrior's ethos, I guess, right? Um, and it's sort of like maybe that's kind of what the left feels they're doing too, and it's kind of like there's a little bit of sort of appreciation for what the left thinks they're doing at least. Um, and I was thinking to myself, like, why would the God Emperor of Mankind be sort of more understandable to me than an actually infinite God in a world where injustice exists and suffering exists? Because if God is limited somehow, then I could actually appreciate why they're suffering, right? Because my choices would actually have an impact. Whereas if God is all powerful and all knowing, then it doesn't make sense. And then, um, and then people mention free will, and it's like I don't believe in free will in the face of an infinite God, because for God not to be infinite means he's not infinite, and for God to be infinite, it means he's infinite. And then some people mean he withdraws his influence or something somehow, and it's like God is literally everywhere all times. So it's like, how does that make any sense, and so on. But then there's like another path I was thinking about just now, which is God is limited because he's created finitude, and he's limited because he's dealing with finiteness itself. And God is infinite, but we are not. But God is the sum. God is the sum of everything we are and more. So God is unlimited, but we are finite. And what it means is our life paths are predetermined, sort of like a Calvinist might say. But at the same time, God can move himself in ways that we cannot move ourselves. And God can move himself in ways that he cannot move us beyond our finiteness and so on. And that might be a limitation from creating finitude from the infinite. And then I was thinking to myself, like, okay, what way to put this is like, if predestination is a thing, then, or double predestination is a thing, then possibly one of the reasons why God sends people to hell or sends people to heaven, assuming, of course, my previous desires of purgatory to heaven for everyone are not correct, is he sees our potential as finite beings, and if he determines that justice in a specific situation is valid, he'll give justice so that we reach our potential through hardship, or he'll give mercy and like the good things in life as we conventionally call them, if he thinks that we can continue to be good and develop ourselves reasonably well. And get to heaven or something like that. And only for the people who neither mercy and good things in life, conventionally speaking, nor justice can redeem, get sent to hell. And therefore, one of the things is this contradicts Jesus' quote that the way is straight and narrow and few dare to tread it, but it does actually follow the biblical passage on countless multitudes entering heaven, as well as 12,000 or something of the 12 tribes of Israel, according to the book of Revelation or something, which might be Jesus speaking as well. So it's like, okay, which one do you pick? Basically, like, the reason why personally I love the God Emperor Mankind way of putting it, sort of, in terms of Warhammer 40,000, is because he's limited. So when suffering exists, something other than him can be the driving force of it. And that something can be a third party, or it can be ourselves, or something like that. Or it could be evil incarnate. And, we're not going to hold it against him for being limited, because he is limited. Even if he is a god, he's just not infinitely powerful. So he's not necessarily allowing suffering because he's just like, oh, I just feel like it, whatever. It's just my decision. You don't get to criticize me for it. It's like him going, like, he would be, and he's of the character where he's like, I'm sorry I failed you, but I had other things and I can only do so much. And it's like, that kind of approach, when it's suffering because of no fault of your own, basically, makes sense to me, because I can't stand the idea of a God that gives what you don't deserve, right? Good or bad things. For me, my internal motivation is I have to work to deserve things, and if I do get something, then from God at least, it's because he sees potential in me to develop and grow, I would think. So maybe I don't deserve it right away, as I am, but it will lead to me deserving it in the end, so to speak. And that's the only kind of position I can take where I'm like, I get something I don't deserve and I don't feel bad about it particularly much, because the potential is developed and cultivated, and so on. So, so like maybe it's like it's the difference between a snapshot in time and a snapshot in extended time periods and so on. So there's who you are at this very exact moment. Maybe you don't deserve something good, and then 10 seconds later you get something good. And then 10 years later, over getting these good things, you become the person more and more as time progresses into the person who would deserve them, and so on. And that's like it's a slightly different way of looking at it, because there's sort of justice in the moment, but then there's also like the cultivation method of dealing with people and so on. And there's the pruning method as well. But I think one way to look at it is, instead of a snapshot in time, what is the potential of someone based on your actions of pruning or feeding their particular aspects and manners of development over time. And sometimes you might feel you have to end their development completely, which is the death penalty, in order for others to grow and strive and so on. And we do that with the most heinous criminals historically and so on. And that's what warfare is for entire societies, basically. But cultivation is the primary method we use with minimal pruning when necessary, as a last resort, so to speak, for things on that extremity. But we might put a slap on the wrist, or throw someone in the drunk tank one day when they're drunk and rambling and kind of shouting at the stars and so on at like 2 a.m. Sunday outside a bar or something, or in a residential neighborhood or something like that. You know what I mean? And that's sort of a form of pruning. A little bit of time I guess technically jail, not prison, which is like a specialized complex for taking people in for a long time, but like the police station jail for like a night until they sober up. Um, you know, um, but like that would be pruning to develop someone better, kind of slap on the wrist to make them not drunk all the time. Or like a little less drunk when they do get drunk, kind of as a negative punishment, to encourage them to cultivate themselves in such a way that they are less disruptive when they're intoxicated, or they get intoxicated less often or less severely or something. And that's one way of looking at it. And then the other way of looking at it is that God gives us good things because he sees our potential and wants to develop it, and so on. And our potential is not recognizable by us, but it's limited, at least in this life, and so on. And each person is ultimately pinned towards the good or the bad, and so on. And hell is only for the ones who are pinned to be bad. And for some reason, their particular badness is such that no matter what you do, good or bad for them or to them, they're always going to be bad. But if you take this view, if you take this, God is limited by his interactions with finitude or limitedness itself. God is limited by our own limits in regards to dealing with us, is one way to look at it, sort of, in a sense. Right? Because he can't make Satan into a saint by snapping his fingers. You know what I mean? I mean, he might be able to, but it wouldn't be the same Satan, so it's not really Satan at that point. You know what I mean? So by creating finitude and the laws of identity, basically, God is limited in his dealings with us as ourselves, in a way. Yeah. So, in a sense, I think I understand a little better what people mean by God withdraws his power to manipulate things like a puppeteer from us. But I think he did that from the beginning of creation, not like a continual event that goes on, unless, or maybe he does it continually. I don't know. But this is the way I word it, basically. And it's sort of like, okay, I understand the problem of evil a little differently, and it means that some people do go to hell and some people do go to heaven forever. And it's based on who they are from the beginning of time, but at the same time, it's about their potential, not who they are at any given moment, and so on. And this makes me feel better about receiving good things, and it makes me feel a little less bad about receiving bad things. If I'm suffering or if I'm getting nice things out of life, because I know that it's not just about what I deserve in the moment, but it's what I deserve to cultivate being good or becoming evil, and my overall potential. So that way, if I don't see the reason for it, I know there's a good reason that God can see about me going into the future, at least.